And it wouldn't be an occult scare film without Dungeons and Dragons.
That's another area as well that poses a very great threat to sucking people into the occult. You know, witches, wizards, Dungeons and Dragons, stuff like that, occult videos about witchcraft and demonology. All these things spark off interest in people.
He raises a good point. Take Pokemon, for instance. Those exist in real life. And D&D could lead to terrible things, like the Dungeons & Dragons movie. But we all know this is secretly Halloween's fault.
Halloween is the highest satanic festival of the year. And it's the night when all the forces of darkness empower Satanists and witches for the coming year.
So you're gonna stop celebrating Christmas Eve then, since the Grand High Climax exists?
A majority of people just accept it as being trick-or-treat, apple dunking and party time. But that's what's going on underneath it. Halloween trick-and-treat is just a very, very acceptable veneer.
I guess I should come clean. When I dressed as the Noble Mouse King for Halloween, I was also sacrificing children to Satan. Other people celebrating Halloween has no effect on you, yet you want to take it away from people, which would have a direct effect on them, just because it's something you're uncomfortable with.
Welcome to part 4, where we are now going to take the 4 things that Asa claims that all pro sides say, and we're going to deal with these specifically. And yes, there's going to be jam-packed full of clips. Because, as Asa put it, the pro side typically have these 4 arguments. So, the midliners like myself, and technically these 2, but one's more of a pro than the other. But, we're going to deal with it as it is. When a topic comes up, I'm going to cram as many things in there as possible so you have as close to back-to-back as possible. Alright? Got it? Great. Moving on. Asa, kick it. Number 1.
Move number 1. That's not what the dictionary says.
The sexual attraction an adult has to prepubescent children is known as pedophilia, a mental disease that can be caused by factors such as a fuck-up in your brain structure, or possibly a childhood trauma that you yourself have experienced. Whatever the reason may be, the intention is all the same. It's a sexual feeling you have towards a child below 13. I don't think there's any sort of argument you could make that would be able to differentiate the two. Yes, while one involves real children and the other involves drawn children, the principle is exactly the same. The audiences both consist of primarily adults. They both involve children as the primary focus. They both revolve around the sexualization of these children, and they both consist of the same dip fucks repeating the same terrible talking points. The only difference in this case that you could find is, once again, one is drawn, another is real. In order for a person to justify lolly as a fetish that causes no harm to children, they would indirectly be justifying pedophilia as a fetish that causes no harm to children, as long as they don't act upon their kink in real life. Now, the intended audience doesn't always accurately reflect who the real audience consists of.
But even if we allow for the freedom of artistic expression, isn't the prevalence of Lolicon in the wider anime sphere an issue? Doesn't that mean the anime fanbase is overrun with pedophiles? I don't think so. Now hear me out. I think that one thing people often overlook is the fact that Lolicon is firmly within the realm of fantasy, not reality, and that is an incredibly important distinction to make, especially when you consider that Lolicon art can be produced without harm, whereas real-world you-know-what cannot. I believe that people can find enjoyment in Lolicon without it bleeding over into a desire for real-world children. Of course, I'm sure there are pedophiles who also enjoy Lolicon, but I don't think it's necessarily causal. Now, what got me thinking of this was a tweet I came across at random. I don't remember if it was pushed by the algorithm, liked by someone I follow, or what. But this user was an unabashed Lolicon, and he was fucking fuming because someone had offered to show him some real-world images. You know what I mean. I'm trying not to get demonetized here. Like, this dude was enraged, horrified, and disgusted that someone would even think of associating him with that kind of material. And the replies showed similar anger from others who I presume were also Lolicons. So that made me think. It was kind of surprising to realize that this person had as visceral a reaction as I would have had in his shoes. For the first time, I came to terms with the fact that there is a very hard line between Lolicon and real children, between fantasy and reality. So at this point, I got to thinking. By then, I'd already pretty much accepted the existence of Lolicons who, for moral and ethical reasons, would never even entertain the idea of pursuing real children. That makes sense to me. I think it's probably fairly common for people to have certain fantasies that they would never consider playing out in real life due to the harm that would be incurred. I mean, there have been plenty of times where I've wanted to punch someone in the face, but I personally would never hurt someone unless it was in self-defense. So that made immediate logical sense to me. But I wanted to explore a possibility I'd never considered. Could it be that there are Lolicons who don't have any sexual attraction whatsoever to real children? And my conclusion kinda surprised me because I actually think it's probably more common than most of us think. To explain this, let's talk about the concept of taboo. Merriam-Webster defines taboo as a prohibition imposed by social custom or as a protective measure, and something that is not acceptable to say, mention, or do. To put it a bit more broadly, a taboo is a concept that is so far outside the social norm as to be considered morally bad by society at large. Now here's the thing. People have a tendency to be drawn to taboos, and in youth, there's often a desire to rebuke societal norms. This is true pretty much universally. So people will often engage with these taboo subjects when outside the spotlight. But what happens when a morally sound person wants to engage with a taboo that also conflicts with their own morality? Well, usually they find an alternate means of engaging with it, one that does not cause harm. Bring this back around to the topic at hand, I think a big reason for the prevalence of Lolicon in the Eastern world is because of how incredibly taboo the subject is. That may seem like a bit of a reach, but let me frame it by talking about a taboo fetish that's more popular here in the West, one that's actually kind of exploded in the past few years. Incest. If you've been on any porn site lately, and I know you have, don't you fucking lie to me, you'll notice that it seems like every other video has something like stepsister, stepdaughter, stepfather. There are even ones for things like step-cousin and step-uncle, even though those aren't actually things. Point being that this is the popular fetish nowadays. Now you may be thinking that the dynamic of a step-family is different than that of a biological family, and you'd be right, but many of these videos use the step prefix purely as a loophole. There are some countries where depicting an incestuous relationship in pornography is actually illegal, so all the big porn sites ban it so they can still gain revenue from those countries. Here's the thing. The overwhelming majority of people are perfectly capable of separating fantasy and reality. We all enjoy things in fictional settings that we wouldn't in the real world, and I personally see no reason why that can't extend to sexuality.
Problem is that it is hard not to treat a pedophile as though they are a potential threat. No parent would want to have their child around a pedophile, for fear that they may do something. As such, the distinction between Lolicon and pedophile is important, because if those that consider themselves pedophiles were to live their lives without touching children and label themselves as Lolicons, it would signal that they have no intention of abusing children. They recognize that their sexual desires are illegal and will only reside within their mind through art. And Lolicons that are not pedophiles can declare that they enjoy artistic drawings of children, sexual or otherwise, and never had any intention of touching children in the first place. Simply put, a pedophile can be a Lolicon, but a Lolicon may not be a pedophile. And, equally, a child molester can be a Lolicon or pedophile, but a Lolicon may not be a pedophile or child molester. The terms are not synonymous, so it is irresponsible to assume that a Lolicon is a pedophile or a child molester until proven otherwise. Of course, the desire to suppress pedophilia is a natural reaction within a liberal society. Under the view that children are unable to consent to sex due to being young, it has given rise to the ideology that children must be protected. Abusing children is seen as a form of rape and is treated as such by law. Although some pedophiles might argue that children have their own sexual desires at a young age, the use of coercion and manipulation are typically required to sexually assault children. Our current liberal society ideologically commoditizes children as pure and innocent, and adults cannot infringe on that sexual innocence until children learn sex by themselves and have reached the age of consent. Because of this, by law, pedophiles must never ever be allowed to have sex with children. and nobody should think it is acceptable to altruistically sacrifice children to sate the urges of pedophile simply because children may have sexual desires at a young age. However, freedom of speech means freedom from interference, suppression, or punitive action by the government, and nothing else. For example, in 2017, the website Patreon made additional steps to remove bestiality, incest, sexual depiction of minors, and fetish content that is hard to distinguish from non-consensual sex. This applied both to live-action media and illustrations. People were displeased by the act and called it censorship, but it is not strictly the case. Censorship is a term pertaining only to governmental action. No action on the part of private entities is capable of censorship. The right to sell or spread your speech or ideas is given permission by the owners of the property. No private individual or agency can silence a person or suppress a publication. Only the government can do that. As such, Patreon can do as it pleases on its platform. However, a freer marketplace attracts the greatest potential of both artists and consumers, creating more money. Between ideology and money, Patreon chose to follow the belief that certain sexual depictions were too taboo to be allowed on their platform. Despite widespread condemnation, people were unable to make Patreon change their policies. The only way to challenge an ideology is for its opposite view to become more popular and to defend free speech as an absolute, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable. Ultimately, the right of those that seek pornography and art should not be infringed by unjust laws that protect the sensibilities of those that find desires offensive. What a community deems to be disgusting should never be an acceptable justification for censorship by the government, or any form of personal discrimination. If a person does not want to see explicit content, then they are free to avoid it. Warning signs may be presented within private spaces and websites to telegraph that they contain sexual content, should they be open to the public.
Now, I can't say the word on YouTube, so we're just going to have to use the word vouch to replace that term that Miriam Hein was so keen to defend in her ridiculous TEDx talk. So anyhow, it's important that we establish the definition of vouchophilia. It's pretty common for a Lolicon weirdo to defend their art by saying it's not technically vouchophilia. Now, the Webster Dictionary definition of vouchophilia is, it's a psychiatric disorder in which an adult has fantasies about or engages in. I want you to remember the keywords fantasy and or here, because the Lolicon will try to slip in the definition of child and will conveniently only cherry-pick this part of the definition, a son or daughter of human parents. But wait, the definition of vouchophilia does not make any distinction as to whether the object of the fantasy has to necessarily be a real child or a fictional one, hence the word fantasy. And fantasy always deals with what's in one's mind, not reality. Fantasy defined here as an unrealistic or improbable mental image in response to a psychological need. If you shake your meat maracas to pics of underage anime girls in various states of undress, congratulations, you're a vouchophile just by definition. So don't let them fool you with the definition of child. They think that these definitions are going to save them from the fact that they know and are aware that the thing they're lusting for is taboo, as admitted by this Lolicon right here.
Remember in part 3 where I said fact versus feel? Well, when you're arguing via feels, you're pulling what the Satanic Panic do. You have to contort, twist, adjust, move the goalposts. You got to do everything you can to keep your moral authority to be right.
Why should that be a rule? Why should somebody else be told they can't do something because you personally find it annoying?
I state this because, as you were able to tell in the series of clips, When either of these two brought up a definition, boom, 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 done. Asa and Devil brought up definitions. Well, let's look at pedophile. The definition of pedophile.
But wait, the definition of vouchophilia does not make any distinction as to whether the object of the fantasy has to necessarily be a real child or a fictional one.
Asa, would you kindly repeat that?
But wait, the definition of vouchophilia does not make any distinction as to whether the object of the fantasy has to necessarily be a real child or a fictional one.
And that's what feels does. Now they're adding adjectives to the definition. Well, Your Honor, it doesn't say specifically fictional child or real child. Alright. Because you said that, though, because Devil said it as well, y'all open yourselves up to any word having that extra factor added in. Like, say, murderer.
All right, yeah.
What rot! Though I did have sufficient motive, 'tis true. That young lady caused me no end of grief. She always was a most unwilling puppet. I dare say her grace was grateful that someone thought to cut her strings.
What the fuck? Just kill him.
You would mock her, then mock her from hell!
What?
Yes! Yes, dude! Fuck yes, man! That's how it's done.
Interesting definition there. But wait, there's more. You see, when it says on what the target is, it doesn't state a factual target, a fictional target, or a real target. So by your logic, by what you have given us as the audience, we must now apply your standard to the word murderer, to the word cannibal, to the word rapist, to anything else that can happen in a video game. We now have to apply that. So, when I stated in part 3, when I stated that, yeah, the normies crying about GTA and the bad actions happening there, you just gave them cover.
First, as mentioned, some more of the viral responses disliking the clip. For example, this one with 8,500 likes by this person, Noodle, who makes this sort of statement, and it seems that people in the responses are not really having it, however. Saying things like, it's literally GTA, please be serious, dude, that's the best part of the game, and I love how it's like 5 people freaking out about crime in a series called Grand Theft Auto, and the rest of the world is like, shut up, it's a video game. Or my particularly favorite response where Ninja Muffin 99 says, when I play Grand Theft Auto, I like to commit so much crime until they start shooting army tanks at me to try and explode me. Moving on to a different response disliking the clip, we have this person who seems to be making an attempt to link Grand Theft Auto gameplay and players to actual shootings. Jack Thompson, John Bruce Thompson, is an American activist and disbarred attorney. As an attorney, Thompson focused his legal efforts against what he perceives as obscenity in modern culture. Thompson gained recognition as an anti-video game activist, criticizing the content of video games and their alleged effects on children. He also targeted rap music and radio personality Howard Stern. Thompson's legal career was further recognized for his actions against the Florida bar, including challenging its constitutionality in 1993. In 2008, he was permanently disbarred by the Supreme Court of Florida for inappropriate conduct, including making false statements to tribunals and disparaging and humiliating litigants. The OP of that tweet then saying, justified again in my belief that this guy is one of the biggest losers on here, and showing the tweets made by G-Man Lives, or at least some of them. So
you just went, yep. The person who shot people in a video game, they need to be investigated in real life. Because something is definitely wrong with them in real life. Because heaven forbid you play something like Grand Theft Auto and commit crime in a video game. Now, Devil does say, oh, these are not the same thing. Playing a video game is totally different than looking at something. Cool. So So you agree with the old school satanic panic slasher mentality?
The two biggest selling artistic genres were pornography and horror.
This was shocking to us, finding horror movies at a genre con.
Hollywood is continuing to capitalize on society's growing craving for the occult and demonic.
I guess he makes a good point. The occult movies are totally a new thing. Aside from this, maybe that. How about a little of this too? You know, it's okay when the older movies did it.
The irony is that while these producers label such films as fun and make-believe,
because they are make-believe,
many of them hire practicing witches or Satanists as technical advisors who ensure the authentic reproductions and performances of rituals.
Okay, that can be true. The Devil's Reign had Anton LaVey as a technical advisor. But I guess it's okay when a Christian technical advisor is brought on board, so long as it's part of a religion you agree with. To their credit, they do interview some people at the convention.
People are so hyper during the day, they need to come home and watch something that's totally unreal so they can release themselves from all the pressures. It's just the type of thing that makes you laugh and forget about life.
Hey, you're doing my job for me. Stop providing a sound argument.
If you watch a slasher, guess what you're going to become? That's right, a slasher. Or a teen that feels his life is useless. You'll be one of those two. There's no in between. No. You watch horror movies, you're going to become that. You watch action movies, you're going to try to become that. Yeah. Yeah. That's by your logic. That's what you just said. Good going. A+, go fucking star. Now, to be perfectly honest, if y'all took the word pedophile, left it alone, and didn't try to add your little adjectives to it, it would have held a far stronger argument for your side. But since y'all want to adopt this mentality of, well, these adjectives aren't added in, so it counts for everybody. Okay, cool. We're going to hold that for murder. You play a video game that has you murder somebody. You watch a show where someone gets killed. You read a book where someone dies. In all these cases, you're attached to the actual murder. Now, here's the funny thing, at least to you, Devil. Because you try to pull this, to be an actual school shooter, you have to perform an actual school shooting. No, that's not what the argument ever was. The argument was, by Jack Thompson, if you're playing a FPS or a shooting game, you're being trained to become a shooter. If you play a violent video game, you, in turn, become violent. Anita Sarkeesian jumped on this as well. Because there is sexism in video games, all gamers are sexist. Well, except for her. She's not exactly a gamer, but she calls herself a... You get the idea. That's your logic. And before you sit there and go, no, it's not. Yes, it literally is your logic. It applies across the board. I saw Anakin Skywalker kill a bunch of people. I'm an accessory to murder now. Because I didn't report it to the police. Just that fast. Just that fast. Now, why did I say it actually holds better without those adjectives? Read the definition. You're good with the definition. The definition holds so much better. Just by itself. But because y'all failed to do that, I'm going to take you at your word. And I have to apply your standards to you. Now, on to some of these other definitions. A lot of them hold some water, but again, keep your ear open and listen to what is being said during these definitions. The whole thing about the attack against lolly show shit isn't an attack on this, it's an attack on free speech. Technically correct. Freedom of creation is under free speech. Now, if you feel that it absolutely 100% needs to be completely censored, even though most hentai are straight up hentai, and that's under porn, and you shouldn't be letting kids watch porn in the first fucking place, but you know people are a little bit slow in that regard. That's more of a you issue. If it's marked appropriately and people fuck up, that's on them.
No, wait, Elmo. Rocco says that he wants the oatmeal raisin cookie. Rocco? Rocco's a rock, Zoe. Rocco won't know the difference. Yes, he will. You can't have that cookie, Elmo. Rocco wants to eat it. How? How is Rocco going to eat that cookie, Zoe? Tell Elmo. Rocco doesn't even have a mouth. Rocco's just a rock. Rocco's not alive.
That being said, we go back to Asa. Rule 34, Asa. Define Rule 34 for us. Which you don't do, because you assume everyone watching knows what it is. For those of you who don't know what Rule 34 is, let's just say Asa fucked up. He's pretty much showing a porno and saying, you see the porn? You see the porn? You see the porn? What if you accidentally see the porn on accident while looking for porn? Just like putting in pink pineapple and looking for something. Just like putting in wood rocket and looking for something. Rule 34 states, if it's on the internet and or popular, there's porn of it. By putting Rule 34 there, he's literally saying, here's porn. Asa, what the fuck are you doing? Anyone looking for Pokemon will not put R34 before Pokemon. You know that, man! What in the blue hell are you doing? What if someone accidentally finds a porn thing by putting in the word PORN? You see how my point keeps getting proven with these folks? When you argue via feels, you have to contort and twist and manipulate. So thanks for proving that point there, Asa. Good going. A+. No gold star. No gold star this time. It's a little bit more on the nose for people who actually pay attention. Next.
Move number 2. Why can't you tell the difference between real and fake? Perhaps the favorite argument of the disgusting lolly lover is that it is a victimless crime. No one is getting hurt by them tuning their fork to A minor, right? Right? Well, consider first the intention of the creator or creators of that character.
Fiction doesn't equal reality.
I see what they're saying, though. After all, as the writer of the movie Freak Out, I'm not only pro-serial killing, but I'm also a serial killer in real life, obviously.
Now, that little story that I did back in a couple of sections before came from this, from Asa. He's trying to play the, well, fiction can cause a problem. In fact, the whole thing I just ranted on about with Rule 34, he says the same thing.
What if, say, a parent that would have normally, under any other circumstances, bought, say, a Pokemon lunchbox of Misty for their kid who loves Pokemon, right? And they first ran into your disgusting Rule 34 pic of her. Now, do you think that would forever be a lost customer for the creator? Yes, it would! My disabled child loves My Little Pony, and she now knows where to search for her favorite characters. Do you think any parent would want their kids accidentally finding Rule 34 of their favorite characters? Do you think any parent that is first experiencing a popular show through your Rule 34 art will still want their kids consuming the product your Rule 34 art is based on? No!
He's trying to play, yeah, porn can affect the sales. Your lolly shit can affect the sales. No, porn can affect the sales. That's what you proved. Rule 34 could affect the sales. Well, there wouldn't be Rule 34 if people didn't do it. Rule 34! It's a rule for a reason! What next? You're going to go talk to Blizzard and say, hey, you should probably get them to stop making porn of Overwatch characters. They tried that at the beginning and failed miserably. Or succeeded epically because it got more information out there. I mean, if you want to be fair, yeah. There are some games that are propped up solely by the Rule 34 law. So keep that in mind. See, I can do what ifs too. It's fucking stupid. Anyway, fiction doesn't affect reality is a complete bullshit statement. Let me explain what I mean by this. Even though it is true, it is also bullshit. I'm going to clarify. 3 ways fiction affects reality. Third way is, of course, propaganda, so we're not going to worry about it. It could just fuck right off. The other 2 ways, however, 1, the person perceiving the fiction is mentally unfit. This means mentally unstable, mentally unwell. Their mentality is not normal. They are mentally unfit. This is where the Slenderman case comes in. This is where John Hinckley Jr. comes in. This is where the movie Cool World comes in. All this is based on being mentally unfit. Now, Cool World has more of a story because it's a movie, and of course there's Who's Framed Roger Rabbit, and that's the thing. And poor Hopkins had to go and get mentally checked afterwards because he had to convince himself those things were actually fucking there. Point is, mentally unfit. That's the first set that can be affected by fiction. Fiction can affect their reality if you're mentally unfit. The second way fiction affects reality is by perpetuating, by inviting discussion and or creation, depending on if you're watching sci-fi or whatever. Star Trek, the old one, you know. When an enemy hails them, it's a full screen thing. It pops up on the screen, and they're looking on the screen, they're talking like Skype. Skype didn't exist when that show came out. Zoom didn't exist when that show came out. But something like that popped up, people started thinking, why don't we have video phones? Well, they had it in Total Recall, the one with Arnold. Again, Skype wasn't out at that time, not specifically. They were working on it. But that just showed that, yeah, why don't we have video with phones? So when people call in saying they're sick, you can sit there and be like, are you really though? Are you? Are you though? Are you really though? You get that, yeah. So, quick review. Fiction affects reality in only 3 ways. Propaganda. Second way, if you're mentally unfit. Third way, inspire conversation and or creation. That's it. Those are the only 3 ways. That's it. You can sit there and spend anything you want. It comes back to those 3. What about the Santa Claus? Number 3, inspires discussion. And you have to coax the kid to behave. You can see that as propaganda if you want. Either or. Religion, same thing. They tell you a bunch of stories. It's to inspire conversation. And hopefully to convince you to act differently. That's it. Nothing more. Now, if you get too clean to shit, we move you back to position 2. The mentally unfit. Again, Slenderman case. They got a little bit too attached to Slenderman. So, Ace's little story. Let's go through it, and let's go ahead and figure out something. The story he started with. The whole, where the artist ends up killing themselves. gosh, what position would we be in were fiction is affecting reality? Let's take a look. Fiction affecting reality. Let's put the 3 up there. Now, according to Ace's story, where's that artist at? Yeah. Moving on.